All right, first of all, let's make sure you're on the right page. Make sure it says adding integers. All right, on the other side it should say subtracting integers, but that'll be the other group. So make sure we're not doing subtracting, we're going to go to adding. All right, so one of the things you're going to hear me say a lot is I'm going to give you the basic rules today, and I'll give you some other explanation of what's going on. All right, but adding integers can be very simple, but it's also one of those things that constantly messes people up, and it can get confusing. All right, so it's not like addition, like this right here. You're like, oh, sweet, 8 plus 9, that's easy. Why am I learning this? Well, we're not. I'm not going to waste your time with 8 plus 9, except for just to show an example what it means. So what happens first in adding integers, if the signs are the same, all right, so if we're adding and both the signs are the same, then we're just going to add and keep the sign. All right, we're going to add and keep the sign. All right, so for example, 8 plus 9, both the signs are the same. All right, we're going to add the numbers. 8 plus 9 is 17. All right, and the signs are both positive, so it's going to stay positive. All right, makes total sense in a number line. If I'm at 8 and I go 9 this way, all right, plus 9, I'm going to hit 17, and that's my answer. Over here, -8 plus -9, same rules. I have an addition. Both the signs are the same. So I have a negative and a negative. So I add the numbers up. 8 plus 9 is 17. But since they're both negative, it stays negative. Now, you'll hear a lot of times what's a negative and a negative. Again, we talked about that in the first day of school. You can't just say what is a negative and a negative. You have to be specific. Excuse me, can't even say the word. Goodness. Specific. Are we talking about addition? Are we talking about multiplication? When you add a negative and a negative, stays a negative, which should make sense to us. If you owe someone $8, so if you're -8, it means you owe someone $8, and you owe somebody else $9. You don't get out of debt. I owe someone 8, I owe someone 9, I owe a total of 17. It'd be great if we lived in a world that if you have two debts, they'd cancel out. Because if, you had a debt on a credit card, open another credit card, spend a bunch of money. It all cancel out. But it doesn't work that way, and I think we all know that. So what happens is, even on a number line, if we looked at this, all right, if I'm at -8, and here's 0, -9 means I'm going away from 0. So I'm going to go more negative. So I'm going to go back 9, and I'll end up being at -17. So you'll see me say a couple different ways. We're going to have this idea of number lines, think of money, go with the rules. And I have one more strategy I may show you later on. All right, number 2, if the signs are different. All right, if the signs are different. All right, then subtract, and the sign is the larger number. All right, and the sign is the larger number. So what happens is when we get down here, all right, it's the thought process is if I have -8 plus 9, all right, I'm going to sit there and say, okay, the signs are different, so I'm going to subtract the numbers. Forget the minus for a second. I just know that 9 and 8 subtracted is giving me 1. Since 9 is bigger, it's going to be a positive 1. All right, same idea here. If I owe somebody $8 and I have $9, then of course I have one more dollar left. I have $9 in my pocket. I owe someone 8. I come to school. I give them the $8. I still have one more dollar. Over here is the same problem, but notice the negative is just on a different side. All right? So what's going to happen is the same idea. Signs are different. Positive, negative. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to subtract them. 9 minus 8 is 1. But the negatives with the 9 is bigger, so it ends up being a -1. So here I have $8, but I owe $9. I walk into school with $8. Somebody says, hey, you owe me 9. I say, here's my 8. And that person's going to look at you and say, hey, you still owe me $1. All right? There's one more strategy I'll use with something like this. All right? If I think of this being above the line being my positive and below the line being my negative, right? If I have 8, I can sit there and say, oh, I have 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And 9 is my negative. I can sit there and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, if I look at this, I realize that if I have a positive one and a negative one, it'll cancel out. So all these cancel out. If I cancel all those out, I'm left with just one below, which is a negative 1. Now, you may think to yourself that this is just childish. Like, who needs pictures and something like this? And you may even, and you don't have to write this down, I'll just give you a quick little example. You're like, what happens if I have 894 plus negative 1092? Right? Well, granted, I understand no one wants to make 894 tick marks and 1092 tick marks. But if I know that 894 is on top, and I know 1092 is on bottom, then I realize, listen, there's more on the bottom. So they're not going to cancel out. There's going to be more left on the bottom. So I know my answer is negative, and I'll subtract these two. All right? If, and again, you don't have to write this down, just watch for a second. If they're both negative, right? If they're both negative, then what I can do is I realize negative 894 is going to be on bottom. Negative 1092 are on bottom. I have 894 tick marks on bottom, and I have 1092 tick marks on the bottom. So how many do I have in total? I just add them up, and that's how much I have. They're all going to be negative. So this is a quick way, and I don't want you to think that this is a stupid, cheesy, elementary, second grade way to learn something. I'm not trying to dumb it down. I just realized for some of you, looking at something visually is going to help you a lot. And I know students who have made A's on a test, and they do something like this just because it helps them out. I've seen students get better on the second test from the first test because they started using strategies like this. So don't wait to use strategies after you get a bad grade or a lower grade than you expect. Start using the strategies now. If you're someone who can memorize rules and you're like, oh, got it, this is easy, then use that. If money helps you, use money. If something like a number line helps you, think through a number line. All right? And same idea with some kind of tick marks. Use something that you know is going to help you. All right? And finally, if the numbers are opposite, then the answer is 0. All right? And this makes sense if you think about it. All right? If I owe someone 8 and I have 8, how much do I really have? I have nothing. All right? If I have $9 and I owe someone $9, how much do I really have? I have nothing. All right? So that's just what's happening here. I have nothing there. All right? So again, we're going to come back to this. You'll see these in reviews a lot. You're going to see these kind of things pop up all year long. You're going to see me review this over and over, and you're like, Mr. Hyde, I got it. But it's one of those things that it's nice to get a refresher on these things over and over and over. All right? So like I said, or will say in the other video, whichever way you've watched it, make sure you come back to these videos if it stresses you out. If you're really not sure what's going on, come back to these videos. Subscribe to the page, link it, do whatever you have to do. So when you need a refresher, you can come back to things like this. All right, so it's about that time. So start getting ready, make your desk look good, and you'll probably rotate here in about a minute. All right, thanks, guys.